They didn't question her combat record. They didn't question her triage scores. They questioned one decision made in 4 minutes of controlled chaos, and they used it to end her career on the spot. A SEAL was down. A canine was dying. Nora Vass made her call. Master Chief Hargrove made his. By sundown, she was out of her unit, out of her assignment, and being walked off the lane like she had done something shameful. Then 2 Navy helicopters landed without warning, and the man who stepped out didn't ask about the SEAL. He asked one question. Where is the medic who saved the dog? Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because this one does not end where they tried to stop it. The charge went off 11 seconds early. That was the detail nobody could explain cleanly in the after-action report. The simulation was scripted to a tight sequence. Demolition charges set at intervals. Vehicle maneuver timed against the blast radius. Every variable accounted for and rehearsed. But the second charge detonated before the first one had fully cleared, and the shockwave caught the rear Humvee on the left flank with the kind of force that turned a training exercise into something else entirely. Nora heard it differently than everyone else. Not as an explosion, as a change in pressure. A shift in the air that her body recognized before her brain finished processing it. She was already moving when the vehicle went sideways. 4 operators went down across the east lane in the first 30 seconds. Nora had her kit open before she reached the first man, Corporal Devens, conscious, bleeding from the shoulder, vitals holding. She packed the wound, gave 2 instructions to the corpsman running in behind her, and moved. Second man, braced against the vehicle wreck, cracked ribs, breathing labored but functional. She stabilized, moved again. Third man, concussive, disoriented, not critical. She left him with a directive and kept going. 14 seconds per casualty. She had done this in places that were not drills. Then Birch screamed her name. Tate Birch was 20 years old and had been Ghost's handler for exactly 6 weeks. He was kneeling in the dirt, 30 feet off the main lane, with both hands pressed against the dog's flank, and an expression on his face that Nora had seen before. The expression of someone watching something die and not knowing how to stop it. She crossed the distance in 4 strides. Ghost was on his side, tan and black coat matted dark on the right flank, rear leg positioned wrong. His breathing was fast and shallow, each inhale too short, like his body was fighting for air it couldn't hold. His gums were pale. One pupil was slower than the other. Nora dropped to her knees, and her hands were already moving. "What happened?" she said. "He went toward the second charge." Birch's voice was cracking at the edges. "Before I could call him back, he moved toward it, and then it went early, and he just—" "How long ago?" "Maybe 2 minutes, maybe less." She pressed 2 fingers along his abdomen and felt the resistance she was afraid she would feel. Distension. Something internal was failing. The pupil response and the gum color together meant one thing, and she did not have time to think around it. "I need a fluid line," she said. "Compression wrap. Atropine if you have it." Birch fumbled at her kit with shaking hands. The corpsman who had been following her from the second casualty jogged up and stopped 3 feet away, reading the situation. "Ma'am," he said it carefully, the way people said something when they were not sure they were allowed to say it. "We still have an operator on the stretcher who needs secondary assessment." "Devens is stable," Nora said. "I left you specific instructions." "Yes, ma'am, but Senior Chief, I heard you." She took the gauze from Birch without looking up. "Go back to Devens. Do exactly what I told you." The corpsman hesitated 1 beat too long. "Now," Nora said. He went. She found the foreleg vein by feel and seated the catheter clean on the first attempt. Ghost's body flinched once, then stilled. His breathing was still wrong, but his eyes were open, tracking her movement, and that meant something. It meant there was still time, if she used the next 3 minutes exactly right. She flushed the line and watched his color. "Talk to him," she told Birch. "What?" "His name, your voice. Talk to him." She kept her eyes on the fluid rate. "He needs to hear something familiar." Birch leaned in close, voice rough and low. "Hey. Hey, Ghost. You're okay. You hear me? You're okay. I've got you." Ghost's ear moved toward the sound. Nora worked the compression wrap around his abdomen with both hands, pulling it taut in measured increments, managing the internal pressure the only way she could in open dirt without a surgical table. It was not ideal. It was what she had. She had learned a long time ago that the difference between a dog that made it and one that didn't was rarely about equipment. It was about whether someone decided they were worth the 4 minutes. She decided every time. "His pulse is thready," she said, mostly to herself, "but it's there." "Is he going to make it?" Birch asked. "Ask me in 3 minutes." The boots stopped behind her before she heard the voice. Master Chief Leon Hargrove. She did not need to turn around to know it. She knew his cadence, the particular weight of a man who had learned that authority was most effective when it arrived without announcement. "Cross." His voice was even, measured. The voice of someone constructing a record as he spoke. She did not look up. "1 minute, Master Chief." "You're treating the dog." "I'm treating the casualty with the narrowest survival window." She checked Ghost's gum color again. Slightly less pale. The fluid was helping. "Devons and Fisher are stable. This animal is not." "That animal is not your assignment." She adjusted the wrap and checked the catheter seal. "He is right now." Hargrove let the silence sit for a moment, the way experienced commanders did when they wanted their disapproval to have weight without becoming a confrontation. It was a specific technique, and she had felt it before from other men in other places. "We have a seal on a stretcher," he said. "I know where the seal is," Nora replied, her voice steady. "I triaged him 11 minutes ago. His vitals were stable on transport. I left detailed instructions with your corpsman." She pressed her hand flat against Ghost's flank, feeling the tension in his breathing shift by a fraction. "This dog has maybe 90 seconds before I lose the window. I am not leaving him." "That is not your call to make." She finally looked up. Hargrove was standing 3 feet behind her, arms at his sides, jaw set, eyes reading the scene with the particular detachment of someone who had already decided what the story was and was simply waiting for it to finish writing itself. "With respect, Master Chief," she said, "it became my call the second I was the only one looking at him." Something moved behind Hargrove's eyes. Not anger exactly. Worse than that. Recognition. He had found what he needed. He looked at Birch. "Handler, get your dog to the kennel bay when she's done." He looked back at Nora. "You, report to admin wing when you're finished here. Room 2 Foxtrot." She already knew what Room 2 Foxtrot meant. She turned back to Ghost. "Come on," she said quietly. Not to anyone in particular. To the dog. To the air. To whatever it was that she had been talking to in moments like this since her first deployment. "Come on, stay with me." Ghost's chest rose. Not the short, fighting inhale of a moment ago. A real breath. Slower. More complete. His eyes opened fully for the first time since she had reached him, and his gaze found her face with the specific focus of an animal returning to consciousness. Birch made a sound that was half relief and half something broken open. "He's breathing. He's actually—" "Keep your voice down," Nora said. "Don't excite him." She checked his pupils again, both responding. Gum color coming back. Pulse still thin, but no longer collapsing. She held 2 fingers against his neck and counted, and what she counted made her close her eyes for exactly 1 second. He was going to make it. Birch was crying silently. He was 20 years old, and he had been trying very hard not to show it for the last 4 minutes, and he had just stopped trying. He pressed his forehead against Ghost's, and the dog's tail lifted off the ground once, weak and slow, but real. Nora sat back on her heels and let herself breathe. Behind her, Hargrove had not moved. She could feel him still there, building his case with the patience of someone who did not need to rush because the outcome was already settled in his mind. She stood up, stripped her gloves, looked at him directly. "He's stable," she said. "He needs transport to the kennel bay for continued fluid management and monitoring. His abdomen needs imaging as soon as possible." Hargrove's expression did not change. "Room 2 Foxtrot. Cross. Now." She looked at Ghost one more time. His amber eyes were tracking the movement around him, calm and steady. The eyes of a dog who had come back from somewhere close to the edge and seemed to understand it without making it dramatic. She looked at Birch. "Stay with him. Do not let anyone disconnect that line." Birch nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Thank you," he said. She did not answer. She picked up her kit and walked toward the admin wing. The form was 2 pages and took her less than 10 minutes to read and sign. The personnel officer across the table could not meet her eyes. The language was precise and clean. Diverted triage resources from a priority operator to perform unauthorized field stabilization on a non-combat rated asset. Pending medical conduct review. Administrative hold effective immediately. Report to room 2F. She had already been in room 2F for the last 10 minutes. She left the voluntary statement line blank. On her way out, she passed the corridor window that overlooked the east training lane. The Humvee was still on its side. Operators were walking the perimeter. Everything had the organized appearance of a situation being processed and documented and filed. Nobody was near the spot where Ghost had gone down. Nobody, except Birch, still sitting in the dirt beside a German shepherd with a tan and black coat and an IV line taped to his foreleg, talking to him in a low voice that nobody else could hear. Nora watched them for a moment. Then she turned and walked to the kennel bay, because she was on administrative hold, and she had nowhere else to be. And because something about the way Ghost had looked at her in the last 30 seconds before she stood up would not leave her alone. Like he recognized something, not her face, something else. Something older than 6 weeks and a training rotation, and a base he was not supposed to be at. She was going to find out what. The Kennel Bay file on Ghost was 4 pages long and told her almost nothing. Nora sat on the floor outside his recovery run with the folder open across her knees and read it twice, the way she read anything that felt designed to be skimmed. Transfer origin, Millbrook Defense Canine Services, private contractor, licensed and bonded. Date of arrival at Coronado, 11 weeks prior. Prior handler, not listed. Training certification level, advanced patrol, explosive detection, urban search. Behavioral notes, responsive, high drive, environmentally stable. That was it. 4 pages, and she knew less about this dog than she did about any animal she had treated in 8 years of service. She looked up at Ghost through the chain link. He was lying on his side, fluid line still running, wrapped tightly, breathing in the slow, deliberate rhythm of a body conserving what it had. But his eyes were open, and they were on her. Not wandering, not drifting in the unfocused way of heavy sedation, watching her with the kind of attention that required effort. "You've been somewhere," she said quietly. His ear moved toward her voice. Birch came back around the corner with 2 cups of coffee, handed one down to her without asking if she wanted it, and lowered himself to the floor against the opposite wall. He looked like someone had taken 6 hours out of him in the last 90 minutes. His boots were still unlaced from when he'd stripped them during the stabilization and never got around to retying them. "His records don't make sense," Nora said. Birch wrapped both hands around his cup. "I know. There's no prior handler listed. No training logs from his certification period. The contractor group that transferred him doesn't have a traceable program directory." She turned a page. "This reads like someone built a file around a dog that already existed and didn't want to explain how." Birch stared at his coffee. "Can I tell you something without it sounding like I'm losing my mind?" "Go ahead." "The day I got him, first walk on the training lane, I said something. Not a command, just something that came out from muscle memory. A phrase I picked up from a contractor team I was attached to for 3 weeks in Bahrain. Hold for mark. It's not in any active field manual I've ever trained from. I said it because I was watching a ridge line, and it just came out." He paused. Ghost locked in, full body, perfectly oriented, like I had just spoken his first language. Nora closed the folder. "What did the contractor team use it for?" "Overwatch sequencing. One handler holds position while another marks a target bearing. It's an old 2-unit coordination protocol." Birch looked at Ghost. "The thing is, that technique hasn't been in standard rotation since they restructured the Joint Canine program 3 years ago. A dog trained on current curriculum wouldn't know it." The number 3 landed in Nora's chest before she could stop it. 3 years ago was when the joint program restructuring happened. 3 years ago was also when she had processed a cross-unit medical coordination file that she had thought about exactly twice since. Once when she filed it, and once last night when she couldn't sleep. She set down her coffee and pulled out her personal device, opened the Saved Documents folder she had never deleted because she had never had a reason to, and searched for a date range. Birch watched her. "What are you looking for?" "Something I filed 8 months ago." She scrolled. "A casualty coordination report from a cross-unit medical review. One of the status fields came back unusual, and I flagged it internally, but never followed up because it wasn't my op." She found it, opened it, read the top line again, the way she had the first time. The way you read something that doesn't fully compute until the 3rd pass. 6 operators listed as presumed dead within 72 hours of signal loss. 1 listed as status unknown. Birch leaned forward. "Which op?" She turned the screen toward him. He read the designation in the header. The color in his face shifted. "I've heard that designation," he said. "Not in a briefing. In a conversation between 2 senior NCOs on the far side of a break room that I was not supposed to be hearing. They stopped talking the second they saw me." He looked at her. "What does status unknown mean in classified language?" "It means they haven't found a body," Nora said, "and they're not ready to stop looking." The door to the kennel bay opened. Hargrove did not knock. He moved through the space the way he always moved, like the room had already been informed of his arrival and had arranged itself accordingly. He stopped when he saw Nora on the floor with the folder and the device. "You're on administrative hold," he said. "I'm aware." She did not put the device away. "Ghost needs monitoring. His corpsman rotation doesn't start until 0600. "That is not your concern." "It is while I'm sitting here." Hargrove looked at Birch. "Handler, give us a minute." Birch looked at Nora. She gave him a small nod, and he stood, took his coffee, and moved to the far end of the bay without rushing. Close enough to hear if he needed to. That was deliberate, and everyone in the room understood it. Hargrove crouched down to her level, which was the most unsettling thing he could have done. It made the conversation feel private. It removed the power structure from the body language and replaced it with something that felt like reason. "You have a strong record, Cross," he said. "I want you to understand that I am not disputing that." "Thank you, Master Chief." "What I am disputing is the judgment call you made on that lane. A SEAL was on a stretcher." "A SEAL was stable on a stretcher," she said. "I assessed him. His vitals supported delayed intervention. Ghosts did not. That is a time-to-death calculation. It is not emotional. Command does not see it that way. Then Command wasn't watching the gum color." She met his eyes without flinching. "I have processed 12 canine casualties in the field. I know what terminal shock looks like in under 60 seconds. I made the right call." Hargrove held the eye contact for a beat. "That dog," he said carefully, "is a training rotation asset. He is not a Tier 1 operator. He is not mission critical. He is—" "Then why," Nora said, "doesn't he have a training history?" Hargrove stopped. It was a small stop. The kind a person made when a door they thought was closed turned out to be open. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "His file is incomplete," Nora continued. "No handler logs, no program certification trail, no behavioral development record. The contractor group that transferred him dissolved 14 months ago. His only intake notation says, 'Do not reassign.'" She kept her voice even. "That is not a training rotation file. That is a holding file. Someone moved him through the system, and they needed him to look ordinary while they did it." Hargrove stood up. The crouch had been a strategy, and the strategy had stopped working, so he was done with it. "You are on administrative hold," he said. "You will not access operational systems. You will not review asset files that are not part of your current assignment. You will report to the conduct review at 0800 tomorrow, and you will answer the questions that are asked." He looked at Ghost once, a look that Nora read and filed away. Not the look of someone evaluating a training asset, the look of someone evaluating a problem. "And you will not be in this kennel bay after 2100. He walked out. Nora waited until the door closed. Then she picked up the folder again. Birch came back around the corner. "He's scared of the dog," he said quietly. "That's what that was." She looked up at him. "What makes you say that?" "The way he looked at him before he left. Not annoyed, not dismissive." Birch sat back down. "Scared." Nora looked at Ghost again. He had shifted slightly during the confrontation and was now facing the direction Hargrove had walked out, ears slightly forward, the low alert posture of a dog who had tracked a sound and was deciding whether it required action. Then Ghost looked at her. Direct, steady, the same quality of attention he had held since she first reached him on the lane. She had worked with a lot of dogs across a lot of deployments, and she knew the difference between an animal that was looking at you and an animal that was looking at you because it understood something about the situation that it was waiting for you to catch up to. Ghost was the second kind. She pulled up the contractor group records on her device and started working backward through the parent organization chain. It took her 22 minutes and 3 different database searches to find the connection she was looking for. The parent organization of Millbrook Defense Canine Services had held a single active defense contract before dissolution. The contract was attached to a joint Special Operations Program designation. She cross-referenced the designation with the casualty report. They matched. Her breath left her in a single, slow exhale. "Birch," she said. "The missing operator from the casualty report. Status unknown. His name is Lieutenant Commander Sean Mara." She turned the screen toward him. He was the primary handler attached to Ghost's original unit. Birch looked at the screen for a long time without speaking. "Ghost didn't lose his handler," Nora said. "His handler lost him." and somebody made sure they stayed separated. The kennel bay was quiet. Outside, the base ran its evening cycle. Drills wrapping up, motor pool closing out, the rhythm of institutional life that continued regardless of what was unraveling inside it. Ghost's monitor beeped steadily, measuring a heartbeat that should not have still been present. That would not have been present if Nora had walked past him on that lane the way everyone expected her to. She thought about that for a moment, about the specific chain of events required to produce this exact situation. A dog with a buried past, an early detonation nobody could explain, a young handler who accidentally used the right phrase at the right moment, and a medic on administrative hold with nowhere to be and nothing left to lose, and a folder full of questions nobody wanted her to ask. She looked at Ghost. Ghost looked back at her. She had the distinct and specific feeling that none of this was accidental. She did not sleep. Not because she couldn't, but because every time she closed her eyes, she was back on that lane, with her hands on Ghost's flank, and the number 3 years running, on a loop behind everything else. 3 years since the Joint Canine Program restructured. 3 years since a classification designation she had found in 2 separate databases connected a dissolved contractor group to a missing SEAL nobody was officially looking for anymore. At 0400, she was sitting at the small desk in her quarters with her personal device, a cold cup of coffee, and the 3 documents she had cross-referenced the night before laid out in the order she had found them. She read them again, not searching for anything new, making sure the connections were real, and not the kind of pattern a tired mind built out of coincidence at 4 in the morning. They were real. At 0530, she went back to the kennel bay. Birch was asleep in the folding chair outside Ghost's run, chin dropped to his chest, boots still unlaced. Ghost was awake. He lifted his head when she came through the door, and his tail moved once, the same slow, deliberate movement from the night before. She crouched beside the run and checked his fluid line, checked the monitor readout, pressed 2 fingers gently to his neck. Pulse stronger than last night, respiration steady, color returning to the tissue around his gums. He was pulling through faster than his injury profile had any right to allow. "You're stubborn," she told him. His ear rotated toward her voice. She was still crouched there when Birch startled awake, grabbed the chair arm, and looked at her with a disoriented expression of someone who had forgotten for 1 second where they were, and then remembered all at once. 0540, she said before he could ask. He pressed his palms against his eyes. "I dreamed about the file." "Which part?" "The part that said, 'Do not reassign.'" He dropped his hands. "Who writes that on a dog's file and doesn't explain why?" "Someone who knew the explanation was classified," Nora said. She stood and looked at Ghost one more time. He had settled his head back onto his front paws, but his eyes stayed on her, watching, waiting. The patience of an animal that had learned how to hold a position for a very long time. She had her conduct review in 2 hours and 20 minutes. She already knew how it was going to go. Hargrove had written the narrative before the lane was even cleared. She was going to sit across from a panel that had already decided what happened, and she was going to confirm her own account, which would match nothing about how they had framed it, and the outcome would be whatever Hargrove had already arranged it to be. She was not going to lie. She was not going to soften the timeline. She was going to say exactly what she had done and exactly why, and she was going to let that land wherever it landed. What happened next surprised everyone, including her. She never made it to the review. At 0750, 10 minutes before she was due to report, the base public address system issued a non-standard notification. "All non-essential personnel, clear the main landing pad. Authorized personnel only. This is not a drill." Nora was crossing the open corridor between the barracks block and the admin wing when she heard the rotors. Not one aircraft. Two. The sound of them came in low and deliberate, the heavy, rhythmic pulse of Seahawks running at approach speed. And they did not circle. They came straight in. Both of them, side by side, descending onto the main pad with a coordinated precision of a pre-planned arrival that had not been communicated to anyone on base through any standard channel. She stopped walking. Around her, other personnel stopped too. Nobody spoke. The Seahawks touched down, and the rotors began winding back, and the doors opened, and the men who came out were not from Coronado. Their gear was different. Their bearing was different. They moved through the pad perimeter with the specific efficiency of people who knew exactly where they were going and had not come here to explain themselves to anyone. The last man off the second aircraft was not in tactical gear. He was in a clean uniform with rank insignia that Nora read from 40 feet away and felt in her spine. Commander Dex Calloway, Special Warfare Group 4. She knew the name, the way people knew names attached to operations that got referenced in hushed tones and never fully explained. Calloway did not run training rotations. Calloway did not do base visits. Calloway showed up when something had gone wrong, at a level that required someone with the authority to reach inside an institutional structure and rearrange it without asking permission. He was already scanning the base as he walked. Not like someone orienting himself, like someone confirming what he already knew was there. His gaze landed on Hargrove, who had emerged from the admin wing at the sound of the aircraft and was now standing 3 feet ahead of her on the path with the expression of a man trying to determine how much of what he was seeing was a problem for him personally. Calloway did not acknowledge Hargrove. He looked past him. "Where is the medic who stabilized the K-9?" he said. His voice carried the specific quality of a question that was not actually a question. The base went quiet in a way that felt physical. Hargrove opened his mouth. "Not you," Calloway said, still not looking at him. "Someone answer me." Birch's voice came from somewhere behind Nora. She had not heard him follow her out of the kennel bay, but he was there, standing at the edge of the path. "That's her, sir," he said. "Petty Officer Cross." Calloway's gaze moved to her. He looked at her the way experienced commanders looked at people when they were confirming an assessment they had already made from a file. Not sizing her up, verifying. "With me," he said. The briefing room Calloway commandeered had been cleared by his team before she arrived. No base personnel, no recording equipment that she could identify. A table, 4 chairs, a screen on the wall that was already running, and Calloway, seated at the head, with a physical folder open in front of him and his hands folded on top of it. Hargrove was in the room, standing off to the right, not at the table. The position of someone who had been told they could stay, but should not speak unless spoken to. He was holding that position with the rigid composure of a man who understood that something significant was happening around him, and had not yet determined how much of it was directed at him. Nora sat down. Calloway looked at her for a moment without speaking. Not performing authority, just reading her the way people read someone they needed to trust quickly and had limited time to verify. "Your conduct review has been suspended," he said. Nora kept her expression even. "Understood, sir." "Master Chief Hargrove's report has been reviewed at my level." He did not look at Hargrove. "I'm not here to relitigate what happened on that lane. I'm here because of what you kept alive." He opened the folder and turned it toward her. "Tell me what you know about this dog." She looked at the documents in the folder. Some of them she recognized from her own research the night before. Most of them were far beyond what her clearance level should have allowed her to access. The classification watermarks were visible across every page. She decided to answer like someone who was not going to pretend she had spent the last 18 hours doing nothing. "His file is a construction," she said. "The training logs are missing."
The contractor group that transferred him dissolved 14 months ago. His behavioral responses include protocols from a joint coordination program that was retired 3 years ago. His intake notation says, "Do not reassign," which is not standard language for any rotation asset I've ever processed. She paused. "And his classification designation matches the parent contract of an operation I found in a casualty coordination report. An operation where one operator was listed as status unknown." The room was completely still. Hargrove's posture shifted, the specific shift of someone who had just understood that they were not the most informed person in the room and had thought they were. Calloway looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Lieutenant Commander Sean Mara." It was not a question. He was confirming that she had gotten there herself. "Yes, sir," she said. Calloway reached into the folder and placed a photograph on the table. Night vision, blurred at the edges, shot at distance. A figure in a ravine with something strapped across his back. Beside him, smaller in the frame but unmistakable in posture and gait, a dog. "Operation Corridor 6, Calloway said. Tier 1 intelligence retrieval. The team was ambushed during extraction. 5 operators confirmed. Mara's body was never recovered." He tapped the photograph. "The last active signal we received before total blackout was from Ghost's vest camera. 12 seconds of footage. Mara was alive, injured, moving deeper into the extraction corridor rather than toward the evacuation point." He looked at her. "We believe he made a deliberate decision to draw hostile attention away from the surviving extraction team." Nora looked at the photograph, at the figure beside the dog, at the way the dog's body was oriented, pressing into the man's left side, matching his pace, holding the position of an animal that had decided it was not going anywhere without the person beside it. "Ghost was recovered by a private security contractor in the aftermath," Calloway continued. "We don't know exactly when or how. By the time we traced the asset transfer chain, he had been processed through 3 separate holding facilities, and his file had been rebuilt from the ground up. Someone moved him deliberately. Someone who had access to both the contractor network and the base placement system." He leaned forward. "Someone who wanted him to disappear and came close." Nora's voice was level. "Hargrove." Calloway did not confirm it. He did not need to. The silence in the room when she said the name told her everything. She heard Hargrove's breathing shift behind her, the single involuntary intake of a man who had stopped being able to control every signal his body was sending. "The reason Ghost is still breathing," Calloway said, "is because you made a call that nobody authorized and everyone questioned." He closed the folder. "His vest camera chip had corrupted data we were never able to recover. But behavioral memory does not corrupt. Mara trained that dog on a route recall protocol specific to the Corridor 6 extraction plan. If Ghost can be brought to the operational perimeter in stable condition, his body will finish the navigation that his training started." He looked at her directly. Mara had a survival window based on his last known position and the terrain. That window closes in 9 days. The air in the room tightened. "You're not here because of your disobedience," Calloway said. "You're here because you're the reason the window is still open." Nora looked at the photograph one more time. At the dog standing beside a man in a ravine 6 months ago, holding his position with the absolute loyalty of an animal that did not understand abandonment. "How stable does he need to be?" she asked. Calloway allowed himself one small expression that was not quite a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. "Stable enough to walk a 2-kilometer route and tell us where to look." Nora thought about Ghost's vitals that morning, the pulse strengthening overnight,
the breathing that had been wrong for 4 minutes on a training lane and was now the most steady sound in the kennel bay. "Give me 48 hours," she said. Calloway nodded once. "You have them." Behind her, Hargrove did not speak. He did not need to. His version of the story had just stopped being the only one in the room, and everyone present understood that something was about to be re-examined, that he had spent considerable effort making sure stayed buried. Nora did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Calloway and thought about a dog pressing his head against the leg of a man who had spent 6 months in a collapsed corridor because he had trusted that someone would come. Someone had to go get him. And the only trail left was a German shepherd with amber eyes and a memory that had survived everything they had thrown at it. 48 hours was not enough time. It was also all she had. Nora spent the first 6 of them in the kennel bay without leaving. She adjusted Ghost's fluid rate twice, ran a manual assessment every 90 minutes, and documented every response with the kind of precision she used when she knew the documentation was going to matter later. Birch stayed. He did not ask questions. He just handed things when she reached for them, and kept his voice low when he talked to Ghost, and learned very quickly that the best thing he could do in that space was stay out of her way while remaining close enough to be useful. Ghost's progress was not dramatic. It was steady, which was better. Dramatic recoveries in the first 24 hours after internal trauma often preceded crashes. Steady meant the body had found a rhythm it could sustain. By hour 18, his fluid line was reduced to maintenance rate. By hour 22, he was weight-bearing on the injured leg for short intervals, tentative but present. By hour 36, he was standing fully, eating, drinking, and tracking movement through the kennel bay with the alert orientation of a dog whose body had accepted that the emergency was over. Nora sat on the floor and watched him eat, and felt something release in her chest that she had not realized she was holding. "He shouldn't be this far along," Birch said from the chair behind her. "No," she agreed. "Is it because of how you treated him on the lane?" She thought about that honestly. Partly, the fluid management in the first 4 minutes made the difference between recoverable blood pressure and irreversible shock. But this, she gestured at Ghost, standing clean and steady at his bowl. "This is him. Some animals just decide." Birch was quiet for a moment. "Decide what?" "That they're not done yet." At hour 40, Calloway came to the kennel bay himself. No aide, no security detail, just the man and his folder, and the specific economy of movement that people developed when they had spent too many years carrying weight they couldn't put down. He stood outside the run and watched Ghost for a long time without speaking. Ghost looked back at him, not with recognition, with evaluation. The careful, unhurried assessment of a dog who had learned that not every person who stood in front of him deserved his trust, and had developed his own criteria for the distinction. "He's ready?" Calloway asked. "He's close," Nora said. "I want another 4 hours." Calloway looked at her. "We have a 7-day window from today. Insertion needs to happen at night. That means we move at 2200, or we wait 24 hours and lose a day." He paused. "I need a decision." Nora looked at Ghost. She thought about what 4 more hours would give her, and what they would cost in terms of the window Calloway had described. She ran the math the way she ran all medical math, stripping the emotion out of it until only the numbers remained. 2200, she said. Calloway nodded. Then he said, "There's something else you need to know before tonight." He opened the folder. "Hargrove has been cooperating since this morning, voluntarily, which surprised me." He placed a single document on the floor beside her. He was not the architect of Ghost's disappearance. He was given a directive through a lateral channel 6 months ago, told that a canine asset being transferred to Coronado was part of a classified holding protocol,
and should be kept in rotation status without drawing attention. He was told the directive came from his oversight chain. Nora looked at the document. Did it? No. It came from inside the contractor network that processed Ghost after Corridor 6. Someone with access to internal base communication systems and enough knowledge of the command structure to route a directive in a way that looked legitimate. Calloway's voice stayed even. Hargrove made a decision that protected his own position without asking the questions he should have asked. He is not innocent. But he was not running this. Then who was? Calloway closed the folder. We're working on that. What I can tell you is that whoever built Ghost's false file had a reason to keep Mara unfindable. The intelligence Mara was extracting during Corridor 6 was not just tactical. It was testimonial. Recorded statements from a source inside a defense procurement chain. Statements that connected illegal supply routing to decision-makers several levels above field operations. He looked at her directly. Mara didn't just get ambushed. He was located. Someone knew the extraction route before the team moved. The word landed in the space between them like something dropped from a height. There's a leak, Nora said. There was. We believe it's been contained. But the reason Ghost was hidden and Mara was left in that corridor is because whoever gave up that route needed both of them to stay buried. He stood up. Tonight's insertion is off every standard communication channel. 3 people know the coordinates. You, me, and the signals tech running the drone. Nobody else. Nora absorbed that. Not even Birch? Calloway's expression shifted slightly. Birch goes with you. He's Ghost's handler of record, and the dog needs that continuity for the behavioral navigation to work cleanly. He paused. But he doesn't receive coordinates until you're on the ground. She understood. She did not like it, but she understood. At 1900, she ran Ghost through a quiet movement assessment in the corridor outside the kennel bay. No commands. She just walked and watched how he moved beside her. His rear leg compensation was present, but minor. A slight load adjustment that most observers would not have caught. His head carriage was level. His attention was forward and steady. Twice she turned a direction without signaling, and he matched the turn without hesitation, staying at her left shoulder with the smooth, natural precision of a dog that had been doing this for years. With someone else. She stopped walking. Ghost stopped with her. She looked down at him, and he looked up at her, and she said the phrase quietly, not loudly enough for anyone else to hear. Just the words, the ones Birch had described, the old joint coordination protocol from a program retired 3 years ago. Hold for mark. Ghost's entire body changed. Not dramatically. The change was internal. A reorganization of his weight and attention that came from somewhere deeper than training. He oriented, not to her, to a compass bearing. Northeast, the same direction his body had pointed the night she tested the phrase in the kennel bay, the same bearing she had checked against the corridor map. He held it for 4 full seconds. Then he looked back at her. I know, she said quietly. We're going tonight. His tail moved once. The transport was a standard utility vehicle, unremarkable, running dark. Nora sat in the back with Ghost's head across her knee, and Birch beside her, checking his kit for the 3rd time, with the nervous energy of someone who was good enough at their job to understand exactly how many things could go wrong. The signals tech sat up front, running the drone feed on a secondary screen. Calloway was not on the vehicle. He was running the coordination from a secure terminal at an undisclosed location, present through an earpiece that Nora wore, and that transmitted only when she keyed it. They touched down at the edge of the operational zone at 22:30. Ghost hit the ground, and the transformation was immediate and complete.
He did not sniff around to adjust. He did not circle or hesitate or check with Birch for direction. He oriented northeast, the same bearing he had taken in the corridor, and he moved. Not fast, deliberately. The precise, controlled pace of a dog executing a route he had been given a long time ago by someone he trusted absolutely. Nora fell into step at his left shoulder. Birch came up on his right. The two support operators spread wide without instruction, reading the formation. They did not speak. Ghost led them through 2 kilometers of terrain in 41 minutes, pausing 3 times at specific points, not to rest, not to scent check randomly, but with the quality of a dog revisiting landmarks. Each pause lasted under 10 seconds. Each time he resumed movement in the same bearing without deviation. At the third pause, he stopped longer. His head dropped. His nose worked the ground in the tight, rapid pattern Nora had learned to read as confirmation rather than searching. Then he sat, clean and still, and looked at a point 6 feet ahead of him. Birch crouched and moved the top layer of brush with gloved hands. Underneath, a field ration pack, opened, contents half consumed. A water container improvised from repurposed material, and scratched into the flat surface of a stone with something narrow and deliberate, 6 characters. Birch read them, looked at the senior operator behind him, and the operator's face did something complicated. "That's his authentication sequence," the operator said. His voice was very quiet. "Personal, field-generated. That's Mara." Nora's heart kicked once, hard, and then settled. Ghost was already moving. He did not wait for them to process what they had found. He stood, reoriented, and accelerated. Not a sprint, an increase in purpose, the particular drive of a dog who had been navigating from memory and had just received confirmation that the memory was accurate. His rear leg compensation disappeared. He moved clean. They followed at a run. Nora's earpiece crackled once, and Calloway's voice came through, controlled and level. "Cross, report." She keyed the mic while running. "Proof of life confirmed at waypoint 3. Dog is moving on bearing. We are 2 minutes behind him." A pause, then, "Copy. Medevac is standing by." Ghost stopped at a collapsed structure, a low-profile shelter built into a natural depression, its entrance partially obscured by debris that had been arranged with deliberate care from the inside. He pressed his nose to the seam at the bottom edge, took one slow, deliberate inhale, and then made a sound that Nora had never heard from him before. Not a bark, not a growl, something lower and more personal, a sound that came from a dog recognizing someone it had not stopped looking for across 6 months and 300 kilometers, and every piece of institutional machinery that had been pointed at making sure this moment never happened. A sound from inside answered it. Not words, just a sound. Human, rough. The involuntary response of someone who had heard something they had stopped letting themselves expect. Nora stepped forward and moved the debris from the entrance with both hands and ducked inside. Sean Mara was leaner than his file photograph by 30 pounds. His beard had grown past his jaw. His left leg was wrapped in something improvised and efficient, the work of a man who knew field medicine and had been applying it to himself for months with whatever he could find. His eyes were open, and they were clear, sharper than she expected. The eyes of someone who had refused to let the clarity go, even when everything else was sliding away from him. He looked at Ghost. Ghost crossed the space between them in 2 steps and pressed his full weight against Mara's side, head against his chest, completely still. Not performing reunion, delivering something that had no other word for it than presence. The specific, irreplaceable presence of an animal that had carried someone in its memory like a compass point, and had just arrived at the place it had been pointing toward all along. Mara's hand came up and rested on Ghost's back. He did not speak for a moment. His jaw moved once and then held. When he finally looked at Nora, his voice was rough and careful. The voice of someone who had been conserving everything, including words. "You his handler?" he asked. "Working on it," she said, and she was already opening her kit. She worked in the dark and the tight space, and she did not waste a single movement. Mara's leg was the primary concern. The improvised wrap had done its job, slowing the infection and keeping the fracture immobile. But the tissue around the wound site was angry, and the fever she detected with the back of her hand against his forehead told her he had been fighting something systemic for longer than he was going to admit. She started a fluid line, cleaned the wound site with what she had in her kit, administered the antibiotic she had packed based on the injury profile Calloway had briefed her on, and checked his core vitals with the focused quiet of someone running a protocol they had run in worse places than this. Mara let her work. He kept one hand on Ghost throughout, not gripping, just resting. The contact of a man who needed to confirm something real was beside him, and was not going to stop confirming it. The senior operator appeared in the entrance. "Medevac window opens in 14 minutes. We need to move." 2 more minutes, Nora said. "Cross. 2 minutes." She did not look up. "If I don't finish this now, we stop twice on the evac route and lose more time than you're trying to save." He stepped back without arguing. She heard him relay her timeline into his comms. She capped the line, secured the dressing, and looked at Mara directly. "Can you walk with support?" "I've been walking without it for 6 months," he said. "That's not what I asked." He met her eyes. She had the impression of a man who had become very accustomed to having only himself to negotiate with, and was now recalibrating to the experience of having someone push back. "Yes," he said, "with support." "Good." She stood and held out her hand. He took it and came up, and Ghost rose with him, pressing into his right side, matching the weight shift like they had practiced it 1,000 times. Because they had. The two of them together had a specific geometry that was not something either of them had learned in the last few minutes. It was old. Built over time, through repetition, through the kind of shared experience that left marks in the body. Nora took his left side. They moved. The evac route was 2 kilometers back the way they had come, and it took them 23 minutes because Mara's pace was what it was, and she was not going to rush it into something that reopened the wound site. Ghost walked at his right hip the entire distance without being asked to. The support operators moved in formation around them, and nobody spoke beyond necessary communication. The specific, economical silence of people who understood that the work was still in progress, and conversation was a luxury for after. Halfway out, Mara said quietly, "How long?" "Since Corridor 6? Nora asked. "Since anyone knew I was alive." She kept her eyes forward. "We had a signal blackout. Your vest cam went dark. The last footage placed you moving deeper into the corridor, and then nothing." She paused. "Officially, you've been status unknown for 6 months." "Officially," he repeated. The word had a specific weight to it. "Calloway never declared you dead," she said. "He kept the file open." Mara was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had a different quality, something stripped down to its core. "And Ghost?" "He was recovered by a contractor group in the aftermath, processed through 3 transfers. His file was rebuilt to make him disappear into a training rotation." She glanced at the dog moving steady at Mara's side. "Someone wanted him unfindable. They almost succeeded." "Almost," Mara said. "A charge detonated early on a training lane 2 days ago, and he ran toward it before his handler could call him back. Tripped the blast. Went down with internal trauma." She kept her voice level. "I was the medic on site. Mara looked at her. "He would not have survived the hour without immediate intervention," she said. "My commanding NCO had a different priority assessment. I disagreed with it." "You lost your assignment," Mara said. Not a question. He had been in the military long enough to know exactly what that sentence structure meant. "Temporarily," Nora said. He was quiet for another stretch of ground. Then, "What made you fight for him?" She thought about how to answer that honestly. "He ran toward the blast," she said. "Before anyone knew the threat was real. He made a decision that protected the people around him and paid for it himself." She paused. "I don't leave things that do that." Mara did not respond to that with words, but she felt the change in the way he was carrying himself, something very slightly less braced, as if he had been holding a particular kind of tension for a long time and had just made the decision to set a small portion of it down. The medevac team was waiting at the extraction point. They moved efficiently and without drama, which was exactly what she needed from them. Nora transferred Mara's care with a verbal handoff that covered every relevant detail in under 90 seconds. The lead medic listened without interrupting, and the first thing he did after she finished was check exactly what she had told him to check. She liked him immediately. Ghost watched Mara lifted onto the transport with his body pressed against Nora's leg and his ears tracking every movement. Not anxious, vigilant. The specific watchfulness of a dog who had not fully processed that the job was finished and was still running the protection protocol at low intensity. She put her hand on his back. He exhaled. They rode back in the second vehicle, Ghost's head across her knee again. Birch, on her other side, asleep within 4 minutes of the doors closing, in the way that young soldiers slept when the adrenaline cut out. Total and immediate. Nora stayed awake. She watched Ghost's breathing in the dark and thought about the last 48 hours laid end to end. The charge going off early. The 4 minutes on the lane. The folder that told her nothing. The folder that told her everything. 2 helicopters, a briefing room, a behavioral test in a quiet corridor with a phrase from a retired protocol, and a dog who oriented northeast without hesitation. All of it connected. All of it leading here. She thought about what Calloway had said regarding the leak. Someone had given up the extraction route during Corridor 6. Someone with access to the operational planning chain had made sure that team was compromised before they moved. That person had also made sure Ghost disappeared and Mara stayed unfindable, because Mara was carrying testimony that could dismantle something large and carefully constructed. She had been thinking about that person since Calloway first described them, and she had not stopped. Back at Coronado, Calloway was waiting at the vehicle bay. He looked at her first, then at Ghost, then back at her. "Mara is en route to surgical. He's going to be all right." He said it plainly. The way someone delivered information they understood mattered more than their delivery of it. "Leg will need 2 procedures. He'll be mobile in 6 weeks." Nora nodded. "I want you to know something," Calloway said. He said it in a different register than his operational voice, something quieter and more deliberate. "What you found in that file, Mara's designation, the contractor connection, the testimonial intelligence he was carrying. You found that on administrative hold with a personal device and no authorization, in under 18 hours, without anyone telling you where to look." He paused. "That is not a standard skill set, Cross." "I didn't do anything someone else couldn't have done," she said. "Someone else would have had the care enough to start," he said. "That's the part that isn't standard." She looked at Ghost, who was sitting at her left side watching Calloway with his familiar, calm evaluation. She thought about what she wanted to ask, and then decided she was going to ask it regardless of whether the timing was correct. "The person who gave up the extraction route," she said. "The person who built Ghost's false file and kept Mara buried. You said you believed the leak was contained." She held his eyes. "Was it Hargrove?" Calloway looked at her for a long moment.
Hargrove was a conduit. He followed a directive he should have questioned and protected his position instead of his integrity. That has consequences, but it is not the same thing. He reached inside his jacket and produced a document, folded once. The individual who originated the contractor rerouting, who built Ghost's false file, and who communicated the Corridor 6 extraction route to hostile parties was a defense procurement coordinator named Wallace Drum. Civilian contractor. 20-year relationship with the same supply chain Mara was gathering testimony against. He offered the document. Drum was detained this morning. The testimonial fragments Mara had secured before the ambush were partially reconstructed from source records we accessed through the contractor network once we identified him. Combined with Mara's own testimony, which he gave voluntarily at 0400, despite being asked to wait until after surgery, a very brief pause that contained something resembling respect, the case is substantially complete. Nora took the document, read the top line, felt the particular specific satisfaction of a thing that had been broken for 6 months, finally resolving into its correct shape. "What happens to Ghost now?" she asked. Calloway reached back into his jacket and produced a second document. He held it out without ceremony. "His operational file has been corrected and sealed. His behavioral training records have been reconstructed from source material recovered from the contractor archive." He waited for her to take it. "His handler of record has been updated." She looked at the document. Canine Ghost. Operational asset. Handler bonded. Petty Officer First Class Nora Vass. Clearance level elevated. Assignment permanent. Public record status withheld. She read it twice, folded it carefully, slid it into her cargo pocket. "And my conduct review?" she asked. "Withdrawn," Calloway said. "Hargrove's report has been formally corrected at command level. Your record reflects no infraction." He looked at her steadily. "It reflects a field medical decision made under pressure that preserved an operational asset and directly enabled the recovery of a missing operator." He paused. "I considered recommending a formal commendation." "I'd rather not," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why I didn't." He walked away. Nora stood in the vehicle bay in the quiet of early morning, with Ghost at her side and the folded document in her pocket, and the specific feeling of someone who had walked through something that should have ended differently, and had not. She looked down at Ghost. He looked up at her with those amber eyes that had been tracking her since the first moment she crouched beside him on a training lane, and decided he was worth 4 minutes. She thought about Mara. About 6 months in a collapsed shelter, building fires only at night, rationing field packs, scratching his authentication code into a rock face, for a team he had to keep believing would eventually come. Not because he had confirmation, because he could not find a reason to stop. She thought about Ghost, moving through 6 months of transfer facilities and kennel rotations, with his behavioral memory intact, his route protocol intact, his recognition of the single phrase that connected him to the person he was waiting to find, still present and immediate the first time someone said it aloud. She thought about Birch saying it accidentally, by instinct, with no idea what he was triggering. She thought about a charge detonating 11 seconds early, and a dog running toward it before anyone else understood what it was. None of it accidental. All of it pointing toward a moment that required exactly this specific combination of people and decisions to produce. "Come on," she said. They walked to the kennel bay together in the pale early light, and Nora did not think about the conduct review or the administrative hold or the 14 hours she had spent being the wrong person who had made the wrong call, according to everyone who had the authority to define what wrong meant.
She thought about Ghost's chest rising on that training lane after 4 minutes that nobody authorized and everyone questioned. She thought about a man in a ravine pressing his hand against a dog's back because something real had finally come back to him. She had been fired for saving a dog's life. That dog had walked 2 kilometers through memory and darkness to bring home a man the system had stopped looking for. And the only reason any of it was possible was because someone had decided, in 4 minutes of controlled chaos, that what was worth saving was worth fighting for, even when the cost of fighting was everything she had. Nora Vass would make that call every single time. And Ghost, walking steady at her left shoulder with his amber eyes forward and his breathing calm and his place in the world no longer hidden, already knew that. That was why he had chosen her from the beginning.